In this video, we're going to be replacing the front driver's side caliper on this 2008 Acura MDX. All right, we're going to take our wheel off and use a 22mm socket. So to start the installation of our new caliper, they come shipped assembled. We're going to take these two bolts out of our caliper bracket. We are a 17mm socket. You don't want to take that one all the way out yet. We'll take this and break this free. All right, now we can take the bolts all the way out. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our pins out. I'm just going to pull them straight out. If they come out with the boots, great. If not, you can pull them off the boot. You can set them aside. All right, this one came out with the boot, not an issue. Just separate that boot. And we'll put that boot right back in place. And we'll just use a small pocket screwdriver to help that rubber in place and push in. All right, we can set this bracket aside for just a second. All right, you can see that our pins come with just a little bit of grease on the back here on the very ends. What we're going to do is just put a little bit more grease right in place here. Just a little bit, all the way around the pin, up to that rib there. This is a lot of grease. We'll probably use this and spread it across both pins. And a little dab on the back. And we can put this back in place. I'm just going to push it down. When we're done with both of them, we'll make sure the rubber seats in the place where it needs to. We'll do the same thing on this one. Just going to give it a little wipe. Wipe off any excess on both sides. All right, so our first step that we're going to do is take the old caliper off and transfer over the brake line. With your new caliper, you will have a new banjo bolt. As you can see here, we have two new crush washers. One's going to go on caliper side, the other one's going to go on the banjo bolt side with the brake line in between them. All right, so we're just going to put them both on the banjo bolt. Put them here just a couple of turns in. And this is going to be a 14mm socket. So we'll go ahead and bring this to the vehicle now. We are going to use a hanger to hang this in place while we transfer over the lines. All right, to start, we're going to take our new caliper. We're going to put it on a hanger. And we're going to hang that up here on our coil spring. All right, before we break this line free with a 14mm socket, you want to have some kind of drip pan or absorbent pads down. You will see brake fluid start to pour out of here. We're going to make this kind of quick. We're going to go from the old to the new, try and minimize our mess. So with a 14mm socket, we'll go ahead and back this banjo bolt right out. On the new caliper, we're just going to take our banjo bolt out and get ready. Going to separate our two crush washers. Now we're going to take the old bolt right out. All right, so we're going to orient our new caliper in the same position as our old one. We're just going to spin it around and we're going to rehang it. So what that allows us to do now is put our brake line in the exact same position. Before we remount our brake line, we're going to get our new banjo bolt and 2 crush washers. And it's going to go just like that. So we're going to do banjo bolt, crush washer, brake line, crush washer into the caliper. Just going to get a couple of threads in by hand. Okay. So now with our brake line in position and our banjo bolt installed, we can go ahead and tighten that down so we can stop the leak of brake fluid. Just snug it up until the brake fluid stops. We will come back and torque it down to spec. All right, now we can remove our old caliper from our caliper bracket. I'm going to use a 17mm socket. At this point, you just want to be careful. Keep one hand on the caliper, and just in case it decides to fall off on your toes. All right, with our 2 bolts removed, we can slide our caliper right off. Now we can remove our brake pads. Let's start with the inside pad. Just push away from the rotor and off. Same thing with the front. Just pull away and off. At this point, you've had a lot of brake fluid pouring out and maybe some grease. Do not get it on the pad's surface. All right, so the last step on our caliper swap is the bracket. We can go ahead and remove these 2 bolts. These are 19mm bolts. This top caliper bracket, because of our setup here and an aftermarket shock, we can't get a socket in there comfortably. So we're just going to use a 19mm wrench. All right, now we can remove our caliper bracket and discard that. All right, so our new caliper bracket also comes with new hardware. Before we install our new hardware on here, we're going to try and keep this metal as nice and pristine as we can by applying a little brake grease into the areas that the hardware will go. Let's just go ahead and spread this around. Everywhere your bracket clips to and makes contact with, mainly right here. I'll hit the other side. All right, now we can go ahead and put our hardware in place. Once you've found the location of the tabs where it sits, press down. Flip it over and do the same on the other side. All right, so now we can install our caliper bracket onto the knuckle. I'm going to just slide it into position. We'll start with the top bolt. All right, now we can move on to the bottom bolt. All right, with a 19mm socket, we will snug these down. On the top one, remember we have to go to a wrench because of our clearance. All right, now we can torque them down to 100 foot-pounds. So now we can install our brake pads. We'll start with the inside, just line up our tabs. And we'll move to the outside. Again, line up our tabs. Starting with the bottom. Seems to be a little easier on this vehicle. And squeeze to the rotor. All right, so now we can take our caliper off of the hanger and we can put it in place. Now we have a little twist in our brake line. We'll just rotate that caliper. All right, so we can see here that our pin is kind of making contact with this top slot here. So we'll need to rotate. So now we're in line here. We can put our bottom bolt in. All right, with a 17mm socket, we'll snug these down. All right, now we'll torque them to spec. All right, so now we can torque our caliper bolts down to 53 foot-pounds. All right, so now we can tighten down our banjo bolt to 25 foot-pounds. All right, so now we're inside the vehicle. We're gonna pump the brakes 3 or 4 times, then we're gonna go bleed the brakes. All right, so now we're gonna take our rubber cap off of our bleeder screw. With a 10mm socket or wrench, we're gonna crack this open about a 1/4 turn. What we're looking for is a steady stream of brake fluid. All right, we'll close this up. And we're going to do this once more just to make sure. Open it up. Just looking for those air bubbles to stop. Once they've stopped, we can go ahead and close it up. And you will want to torque this down to 7 foot-pounds. You do not want to over-tighten the bleeder screw or you may break it off inside there. Once that's done, we're going to put the cap on it. All right, so now that you've tightened up your bleeder screw and your brake hose, the 2 points of which it may leak from, we're going to hit it with some brake clean, clean off any old fluid, residue, and when that dries up, you should be able to see in the future, or check it right after if you do have any leaks. Also, when you're done with this and you've bled your brakes, you want to go up top, you want to check your brake fluid reservoir and make sure your fluid level is between the high and low. If it is on the low side, be sure to add some brake fluid if you need to. All right, so we're just going to not torque these, but just tighten them up, and we'll come back and torque them. All right, so now we can torque down our lug nuts. We're going to tighten them down to 94 foot-pounds. Again, we're going to use a 22mm socket for that. We're going to do them in a crisscross pattern.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.